My name is John, and I'm 18. I've always considered myself a rational person, not prone to fears and superstitions. But that night changed everything. I was driving to a friend's house in a neighboring town, and to save time, I decided to take a shortcut that an acquaintance had once mentioned to me. It was a narrow road leading through the woods, rarely traveled by anyone. The evening turned into night, and the ski broke into a heavy rain, hiding the road under a shroud of water. I was feeling confident until I heard a sharp sound, a flat tire. My heart sank into my heels. I pulled over, got out of the car, and surveyed the damage. My phone was only showing a couple of percent charge, and I realized that I would soon be completely without a connection. It was useless to wait for help. No one was passing by. So I decided to walk. I closed the car and walked along the road, hoping to find some help. But soon the road led me straight into the woods. When my phone finally turned off, I was alone in total darkness, surrounded by the sound of rain and wind. My rationality hadn't gone anywhere, but fear seemed to fill the space around me. Fear of the dark was one thing, but fear of getting lost in the woods, when every rustle makes you wince and every shadow seems to be something alive, was something else entirely. I tried to stay calm, reminding myself to walk straight ahead, trying not to deviate from my direction. My mind tried to push away thoughts of wild animals that might be lurking in the darkness. But I kept going. Each step was difficult, but I knew I had to keep moving forward no matter what. As I got deeper into the forest, the sounds of the night grew louder. The rain was no longer just rain. It had become a noisy symphony, with each drop hitting the leaves with such force as if it were trying to awaken something ancient and forgotten. I tried not to think about what might be lurking in the darkness, but the farther I got, the more I felt someone's eyes on me. Suddenly I thought I heard footsteps. They were barely audible amid the rustle of leaves and falling drops, but I was sure they weren't the echo of my own footsteps. I stopped, trying to see if someone was sneaking up on me. But as soon as I froze, the footsteps stopped. I waited a little longer, holding my breath, but when I started moving again, they resumed. It was so frightening that I felt my legs begin to tremble. It's just my fantasy, I convinced myself, trying to keep my own spirits up. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. There was someone else in the woods, someone who was following me in the darkness. I quickened my step, trying to get out of this place as quickly as possible. In my imagination, the forest was filled with eyes watching me from all sides. I could feel the adrenaline overwhelming my body, making my heart beat so hard I could hear it in my ears. Finally, when my strength was running low, I noticed a flicker of light through the trees. It wasn't a bright light, but rather a dim glow, but in that setting, it seemed like a beacon of hope. I headed towards the source of the light, praying that it was a way out of the forest, and it was indeed a way out. I stepped out onto the roadway where, to my surprise, I noticed the approaching light of headlights. With my last strength, I stepped out into the road and raised my hand, barely believing that my night of horrors would finally be over. The car stopped, and a middle-aged man got out, with concern in his eyes. He helped me fix my flat tire and even offered me hot coffee from a thermos. When I told him about my journey through the forest, he listened attentively but made no judgments. "The forest is full of mysteries," he said when we had finished. "Sometimes it is best not to disturb them." As I drove to my friend's house, I couldn't shake the feeling that last night I had indeed encountered something inexplicable. Although I reached my destination safely, the impressions of that night will stay with me forever. My name is Jack. At the age of 16, I witnessed something that changed the way I viewed the world around me. It happened one fall evening when the wind was slowly whipping fallen leaves through the streets, and I decided to buy a new game for my console. Getting home on the subway seemed like an everyday ritual, until that evening. Sitting in the nearly empty train car, I felt fatigue come in waves. I thought I would only cover my eyes for a moment, but I woke up in total darkness. The wagon was standing still, and my phone was dead. For the first time in my life, I felt a real fear of being alone and forgotten. Not wanting to stay trapped, I decided to get out of the car. Along the dark subway tunnel, I moved forward, treading carefully on the tracks, my breath echoing in the void. Then I saw the shadows. They were reaching for me through the darkness, slowly but steadily. I tried to run away, but where to run in the confined space of the dungeon? In desperation, I found a door and locked myself in the maintenance room. The knocking on the door, which began a few minutes later, was so loud and insistent that the whole room seemed to shake with me. I huddled in the corner with my eyes closed, begging for a miracle. Time seemed to stop. The pounding subsided, but the fear remained, filling every corner of my mind. After sitting in complete silence for about an hour, I found another door leading into a long, dimly lit hallway. As I moved forward, my footsteps sounded quieter and quieter, for in my imagination, the corridor was filled with all my fears that had come to life in the darkness. When something cold touched my hand, I couldn't help but scream. It was the peak of my fear, the epitome of every nightmare I could think of. But when the lights came back on, I saw the guard in front of me. He was so real and alive that I couldn't believe my happiness. The guard told me that I had gotten lost in a closed part of the station when the train had been emergency stopped due to a technical problem. He helped me out into the light and even offered me his cell phone so I could call home. When I finally got home, I found that it had only been a couple hours, but it felt like I had spent an eternity on that subway. That night would stay with me forever. I will never again be able to stare calmly at dark corners and closed doors, knowing that fear is not just a feeling. It can become your companion if you let it in. Jamie waved goodbye to his parents, feeling a rush of excitement. "Remember, no parties!" Mom shouted jokingly. Jamie only rolled his eyes. Yeah, he muttered back, dread already anticipating the marathon of horror movies they planned to watch. As soon as the door slammed shut, the house fell into a different state, a silence that was both peaceful and unsettling. Pushing the restless thoughts away, Jamie headed to the kitchen for popcorn and then settled into the living room. The climax of the first movie was near when Jamie heard it. A quiet thump, as if something had fallen upstairs. Probably a cat, Jamie thought, stopping the movie, but a lump tightened in his stomach. They didn't have a cat. As Jamie stood up, contemplating whether to go check, the light blinked on. A drift of air made the curtains move. And again, silence. The feeling of unease increased, but Jamie forced himself to laugh. Great! The house decides to get creepy as soon as I'm alone. Jamie's heart hammered a little harder as the laughter dissolved into silence. Deciding that ignorance was bliss, he went back to watching the movie, pushing the worry farther away from him. But the stillness didn't linger. The knocking was followed by a series of quiet, shuffling sounds, like the whispering of fabric against carpet. Jamie turned off the sound on the TV, listening, but the sound just as suddenly disappeared, leaving behind only an oppressive silence. With a deep breath, Jamie started the movie again, trying to drown in the fictional world of the screen. But the fiction seemed to seep into reality when the lights started flickering again, this time more aggressively. Frost ran down Jamie's back, as the temperature in the room plummeted and breathing became visible in front of them. "These aren't my hallucinations," Jamie whispered to the empty room, a chill of fear mixed with a rush of adrenaline running down his back. The night stretched on, and Jamie's attempts to ignore the growing unease were futile. The sound of dishes falling to the kitchen floor made Jamie flinch. The dim light from the TV cast long shadows, turning familiar furniture into menacing figures. Armed with a flashlight, Jamie headed for the kitchen, where they were hit by the noise of their own heartbeats. Chaos greeted them, broken dishes on the floor, cupboard doors flung open as if after a frantic search. But the TV, turning on by itself and quickly changing channels, pinned Jamie in place. The screen stopped on a noisy channel from which came inaudible whispers of white noise. Jamie realized this was no ordinary breakdown. Not knowing where to run and driven by a desperate need for an explanation, Jamie began a thorough search of the house. Every room was empty. No intruders or faulty wiring could be found. The flashlight light brought little comfort, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance on the edge of visibility. Back in the living room, Jamie found his cell phone, hesitating before calling his parents. "They'll just think I'm making something up," Jamie thought, feeling the weight of loneliness on him. Instead, Jamie turned to the internet, searching for anything that could explain what was happening: electrical interference, gas leaks, anything. But in the back of his mind, he realized that these events defied logic. When Jamie returned to the kitchen to clean up the mess, he saw it. A fleeting shadow, more felt than seen, that slipped behind them, reflected in the glass of the window. Jamie turned around sharply, piercing the darkness with flashlight light, but found nothing. The air grew cold, breath became a cloud as Jamie whispered in the darkness, "Who are you? What do you want?" A sudden warmth followed in response, an inexplicable feeling of understanding sweeping over Jamie. This was not something to be feared, but a creature seeking contact, trapped and alone. Realizing his resolve, Jamie began searching through old boxes of family records, online archives, any information that might illuminate the history of their uninvited guest. Hours flew by, the night deep into the early morning, but finally, Jamie found it. A tragic story, forgotten by time, a young life cut short where their family home now stood. The pieces of the puzzle came together. The unexplained phenomena was a desperate attempt to connect, to be heard and remembered. Now aware of the spirit's pain and loneliness, Jamie set about honoring his memory. With a simple but heartfelt ceremony in the backyard at sunrise, Jamie spoke words of remembrance and release, calling on the spirit to find peace. With the last words, a calm descended over the house, the oppressive atmosphere dissipating like fog at dawn. Jamie felt gratitude in the air, a final goodbye as the presence that had darkened the night vanished. Exhausted but at peace with himself, Jamie watched the sunrise, the events of the night seeming almost like a dream. When his parents returned, they found Jamie asleep on the couch, the house quiet, the morning light flooding the room through the open curtains. Jamie never fully told them what had happened that night, but the experience had changed them. They had faced their fears, uncovered a forgotten history, and helped a lost soul find peace. The house felt different now, not as a place of persecution, but as a home that held the memories of the living and the dead, a reminder of the thin line between worlds.
It was late when Alex and Danny drove their old Ford to Uncle Michael's house in the neighboring town, through a thick and gloomy forest. Their father watched them through the old kitchen window, his gaze heavy and warning. "Don't turn off the highway," he said quietly but sternly. "And remember, the road doesn't forgive mistakes in the dark." The car's engine roared, reflecting the nervous tension that began to envelop the brothers as they passed the last lights of the town. The road ran off into the darkness like a black tongue, calling them into the unknown. The forest around them was deaf and unfriendly, and tree branches like twisted fingers scratched the night sky. At first, the brothers' conversations were lively and filled with jokes, but as they went deeper into the forest, the silence began to crawl into the car interior like a cold fog. Alex tried to keep his eyes on the road, but his thoughts were distracted by the strange legends that spoke of roads filled with ghosts and mysterious creatures that the adults whispered about. They didn't notice the car creeping up behind them. The first thing that caught Danny's attention was a flicker of light in the rearview mirror. He turned around and saw a black pickup truck slowly approaching, its headlights occasionally flickering like a cat's eyes. The pickup kept its distance, but its presence was menacing. "Who do you think he is?" Danny asked, his eyes reflecting worry. "I don't know," Alex replied, trying to sound calm. "But we better speed up." He gave the gas, and the Ford tore forward, but the pickup kept up. It followed them like a pesky shadow, sometimes coming so close that it looked like it was about to swallow their smaller car. "Maybe he needs help," Danny suggested uncertainly. "On a night like this?" "I don't think so," Alex snorted. "It could be anyone. We should stay away." Their journey continued, and the pickup never ceased its silent pursuit. They passed an old abandoned bridge where strange disappearances of people were rumored to occur. Under the bridge, legend said, lived a witch who hunted lost travelers. The brothers cast anxious glances there but sped up, trying to get away from their pursuer and the pressurizing atmosphere of the place. When they entered a section where the road twisted among the cliffs, the pickup disappeared. Alex exhaled with relief, but the joy was premature. From around the bend, something huge and dark crawled out onto the road. It was something too big for an animal, too strange for a car. It moved smoothly and nonchalantly crossed the road directly in front of them, causing Alex to brake sharply. "What was that?" Danny asked in a shaky voice. "I don't know." Alex tried to see through the fog, but the creature disappeared into the woods. "But it's definitely not something that belongs on this earth." They kept driving, their hearts pounding to the beat of their old Ford. The pickup truck appeared again, as if it had grown out of the darkness itself. It was going much slower this time, and when the brothers caught up with it, they saw that the driver's door of the pickup was open and the driver wasn't in it. "We should check to see if everything's okay," Alex said as he stopped the car. "Maybe the man needs help." They got out of the car, looking around. The wind whispered in the leaves, and it felt like the trees were telling them to leave. But they ignored the feeling and walked over to the pickup and looked inside. The cab was empty except for an old flashlight that barely shone. There was a note lying on the seat. Alex picked it up and read it aloud. "Don't turn away." They slowly turned around and something moved in the darkness behind their backs. When they turned around, their eyes were confronted by a figure so tall and curving that it seemed to swallow the night around it. The figure stood at the edge of the road with its back to them, but then slowly began to turn to face the brothers. Her face was hidden in shadow, but there was a fear emanating from her that made the blood in their veins run cold. "What do you want from us?" whispered Alex, trying to hide the anxiety in his voice. The figure didn't answer, only slowly continued to turn until it was face to face with the brothers. Her eyes, glittering and black as coal, dug into their souls. Her body was clad in long, ragged clothes that barely rippled in the wind. Danny took a step back, feeling his legs begin to shake with fear. Alex, trying to keep his composure, clenched the flashlight in his hands. "Follow me," the figure said in a deep, resonant voice, starting to move slowly towards the forest. Not knowing why, the brothers followed it. The deeper they entered the forest, the quieter the night around them became. The sounds of the forest faded away, leaving them in a stifling silence. They followed the figure, feeling each step taking them further and further away from the world they knew. After a long, silent journey through dense thickets, they stopped in front of an old, ruined house that seemed to grow straight out of the ground. The figure pointed to the house. "Here you will find what you are looking for," it said, disappearing into the darkness as if it had never existed. The brothers, exchanging glances, slowly approached the house. The door creaked open in front of them, and they stepped inside. Inside the house, there was an atmosphere of antiquity and oblivion. The air was saturated with the smell of mold and mustiness. Suddenly, their attention was drawn to an ancient journal on a dusty table. Alex picked it up and began leafing through the pages, covered with small, neat handwriting. "It's a journal," he said to Danny. "Look, it's written about our home, our family." The pages described events from 100 years ago, the fates of their ancestors, their connection to this place the brothers had never known. With each page, they learned more about the ancient curse that had been placed on their family. Suddenly, the wind picked up, and the old walls of the house began to make strange noises. The brothers felt the past and present begin to intertwine and realized that they were part of something much bigger than just an overnight trip. They walked out of the house, feeling the shadow of the figure that had brought them here still hovering around. Their hearts were filled with fear, but also awe at the dark secrets of their kind. As they walked back to the car, they noticed that the pickup had disappeared. A thin rain began to fall from the sky, as if nature was trying to wash away the remnants of the previous night. Soon, they left the forest, returning to the bright streets of their city. But the memory of what had happened would haunt them forever, reminding them of the thin line between our world and the world of shadows. It is already the third hour of the night, and the whole world seems immersed in silence. The snow continues to fall slowly outside the window, covering everything in a fluffy white blanket. My parents are gone for the weekend, leaving me, Ellie, alone in our big house on the outskirts of town. I always thought it would be fun, but now, on this dark, snowy night, I feel uneasy. It all started innocently enough. I gave myself a movie marathon with popcorn and hot cocoa, enjoying a moment of silence without my siblings. But when the movie ended, the house got too quiet. So quiet that every creak of the floor sounded like thunder. I tried to go back to sleep, but a sudden cold draft made me wake up. Thinking it was just the wind, I got up to see if all the windows were closed. As I walked around the house, I heard something like a rustle. I stopped, listening. The sound was coming from behind the back door. I slowly walked over, my heart pounding like crazy. It was dark behind the door, and I couldn't see anything through the frosted glass. My breathing quickened as I tried to see something in the dark. Then I heard someone's footsteps. They were slow and heavy, and they seemed to be approaching the house. I got scared and ran to the kitchen to get the phone to call the police, but the phone was dead. I went back to the door, shivering with fear and cold. The footsteps stopped, and suddenly the banging began. Heavy, thudding blows on the wood. It became clear to me that someone was trying to get in. I hid in a closet in my room on the second floor, holding my breath. The knocking continued, each thump making my pulse beat faster. I closed my eyes, trying to suppress the fear. Suddenly the pounding stopped. The silence became even more oppressive. I didn't know if someone had entered or left, but I was afraid to come out of my hiding place. Then I heard footsteps in the house. They were slow but determined. Someone was coming up the stairs. I shrank into a ball, praying it was just a bad dream. Reaching the top of the stairs, the footsteps stopped. The silence, for a moment, became even more frightening. I felt every hair on my skin stand up as the doors of the rooms began to slowly creak open. Ellie, hiding in a closet, fought the urge to scream. Fear constricted her throat and her breathing became quieter and quieter. It sounded like the stranger was looking for something, or someone. Footsteps approached her room. The door slowly opened, and Ellie could hear the man stop on the threshold. The light from a street lamp, shining through the spotted windows, cast a shadow on the floor. The shadow moved, reminding her of a slithering ghost exploring her belongings. Ellie clenched even tighter, holding her breath. The stranger approached the closet where she'd been hiding. She could hear his heavy breathing, feel the cold coming from his clothes. There was a sense of purpose in his movements. He was reaching for the closet door, and each movement seemed like an eternity. Suddenly, the house phone rang. The sound cut through the silence, causing the stranger to freeze for a moment. Ellie felt her heart ready to jump out of her chest. The stranger backed away, as if deciding that the source of the sound was more important than searching the room. Footsteps hurried by, descending back down the stairs. Ellie waited, hesitant to come out of hiding. Her breathing grew deeper with each distant step. She knew she had to act. While the stranger was busy on the phone, she had a chance to escape or hide better. She slowly opened the closet door and looked out into the hallway. The darkness seemed like protection for her, but also a trap. She had to decide if she should run now or wait. Ellie took a deep breath and took the first step. Her legs trembled, but her determination to move on was stronger than fear. Ellie slowly walked to the window of her room, trying not to make too much noise. The snow continued to fall, and the streetlight created an even patch of light on the ground, surrounded by darkness. She pulled back the curtains and opened the window, feeling the cold air on her face. Snowflakes touched her skin softly, reminding her of the reality of the danger she was in. With her heart pounding in her chest, Ellie began to call out for help. Her voice, initially shaky and unsure, soon grew stronger and louder. She screamed, hoping the neighbors would hear her over the howling wind and the sound of snow. For a moment, it seemed like nothing was happening, and fear began to envelop Ellie again. But then there was an answering sound heard in the distance, screams. Neighbors, awakened by her screams, began to respond and call for the police. Encouraged by this, Ellie continued to scream, but suddenly she felt eyes on her. She turned around and saw a stranger standing in the doorway of her room. His dark figure stood out against the light-colored hallway. Ellie flinched, her voice frozen in her throat. The stranger stepped forward slowly, his face hidden in shadow. At this critical moment, when every second seemed like an eternity, Ellie heard the distant sound of sirens. The police. They were getting closer, and the sounds of the sirens grew louder and louder. The stranger stopped. He seemed to hesitate. Ellie took advantage of this moment. She quickly pushed the window wider and yelled even louder, indicating her location. The stranger took a step back, as if realizing his time was up. The next minute, police officers rushed into the house. They quickly went upstairs and found Ellie at the window and the stranger trying to back away. The situation was quickly resolved. The stranger was apprehended, and Ellie was given the necessary assistance. This moment was a turning point for Ellie. She realized how important it is to remain calm and resourceful, even in the most desperate situations. Her story was a reminder that danger can come from the